It is the season you've been waiting for here on Now. It is January 19th, 2023, and while that date may not be significant to you, it certainly is to us here at Now. See, it's the beginning of our third season on the stream, and we thank you for supporting us all this time, and we certainly thank you for being here tonight. I'm Elliot Francis. Well, we begin tonight with a tragic story out of Washington, D.C. A 13-year-old boy is shot and killed, not by a thief or by a mugger or even a cop, but instead by a neighborhood resident who claims that 13-year-old Karon Blake was tampering with cars near the man's home in Washington, D.C. According to investigators, Karon Blake, who was unarmed, was shot multiple times. He was taken to an area hospital where he was later pronounced dead. The resident who shot Blake is licensed to conceal carry a firearm. However, it is illegal in the district to use lethal force against a property crime in D.C. The still unidentified man was not arrested and remains free nearly 2 weeks following the incident. Days later, at a community meeting, nearly 300 residents gathered to demand police action.
You saw exactly what he did. He should have been arrested. There's nothing else to investigate here. And when you tell us that, you insult our intelligence.
We don't have to wait this long to find out who's done the murder. Because this is, in fact, a murder, a homicide, no matter how you look at it.
At a press conference, D.C. Metro Police Chief Robert Conti pushed back at critics of his department while providing more information about the shooter.
Again, this thing is getting really reckless and dangerous with some of the behavior that I'm seeing. We normally do not identify people similarly situated in a situation unless we have a warrant in hand for that person, or unless there's a person who we are trying to identify, then we don't know who that person is. That is not what we're dealing with here. I can tell you that the person is an African-American person. I can tell you that much. I can tell you that it is an adult, and I can tell you that it is a male. Those are the three things that I can tell you about this particular person. It is obviously very unfortunate that we have had a loss of life in this case, but we got to make sure as a community that we get this right. And people are rushing to judgment. People are canvassing communities, looking for a suspect. That's not right.
Conti also explained why an arrest hasn't been made.
There are a lot of cases that happen in our city where arrests are not immediately made because all of the facts are not known. So for anyone to speculate or to make an assumption that, make an arrest immediately and then the judge throws it out the next day, that's justice for the family, that's doing this case justice. No. We're going to get this right. We're going to do it the right way, and we're not going to be influenced because of some people who think that this should have happened or that should have happened.
During a vigil held later that week, family, friends, and classmates remembered the 13-year-old with tears and memory.
He was the nicest boy in my class. He was always funny. He made everybody smile. I know he's not here right now, but all I wanted to say is that I love you, Karon, and I would miss you so much.
D.C. City Council member Zachary Parker represents Ward 5, the neighborhood where the shooting occurred. Parker spoke with us about the killing. In your opinion, was this shooting at all in any way justified?
We don't know all of the details, but I find it hard to ration how a 13-year-old would be killed dead. I don't condone violence of any kind, and it has been said many times, if a neighbor felt as though there was a crime in progress, the right thing to do would have been to call 911.
The Metro Police have not yet made an arrest. Any idea why?
We have no idea, and that is part of the problem. I have stood with Ward 5 neighbors and colleagues in calling on MPD and the U.S. Attorney's Office to release more information in this case, to share more information with Karon's family, but also to apprehend the individual that took Karon's life. Again, it is hard to square how someone, whether or not it's in self-defense or whatever the justification is, can shoot and kill someone, let alone a 13-year-old, and go back into their home to have a good night's rest. And so there is something different about this case, and we are pushing and calling to hold the MPD and U.S. Attorney's Office accountable.
I understand a grand jury has been convened for people who don't understand the process. For what purpose, and how long should that process take?
We don't know, but the purpose of the grand jury, which is made up of district residents, is to determine whether or not charges will be brought against this individual. It is still worth knowing that the name of the individual has not been made public, nor has that individual been apprehended. And so we are waiting for the justice system to play out. But this case, the importance around it is that it is setting a precedent in DC. The district is a city where we haven't had many of these cases where self-defense is being used in the killing of another individual. And so this case will set the stage for many years to come and how authorities should be governing. And that is why many of us are so concerned, because what we're seeing is that the family and community members have been cut off from information, and we're now at the mercy of a grand jury.
The shooter has been described as an African-American male resident of Ward 5. And Mayor Bowser described him as a government employee. What's the possibility between those two facts and the lack of an arrest?
Many are speculating as though there's more at hand here as to why this individual wasn't apprehended. I don't want to speculate and give details or guess why certain decisions were made, but it does beg the question, again, how someone can take a 13-year-old's life and not be arrested. One thing I would say, it was important information shared that this was African-American, as well as someone that works for district government. What has not been shared, though, is who this individual is. And so put yourselves in the shoes of neighbors that live in that community. They are living in fear, not knowing which one of their neighbors is actually responsible for killing a 13-year-old. Also put yourself in the shoes of the family who is still wanting answers about their loved one and what actually happened on that night. And so I think it's a dangerous precedent to set where we are leaving matters of justice and transparency up to a grand jury. And while I have faith in our justice system, I think there were many lessons learned in this case.
As we said, he's been described as a government employee, a DC government employee. You are as well. Are you familiar with this individual?
Again, I don't know who the individual is. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you if I have met him, if I know him, if I'm working with him, if I walk by him. And that is the danger. And that is why neighbors are so up in arms around the circumstances surrounding this case.
Yeah. This happened at about 4 a.m. in the morning, if my memory is correct. Have you been told why this young man was out at that hour, 4 a.m., 13-year-old?
No. And what family members have shared and what we know to be true is that teenagers sometimes get into trouble, whether that means sneaking out of the house or what have you. That is not a sentence to death. And by no means am I justifying any activity that may have been underway or that could have been underway. There's speculation that individuals were concerned about car theft. I think some who are trying to criticize the call for more information in this case are conflating a call for information and transparency with looking the other way for crime, and that is not what's happening here. I don't know the details of what led Karon out of the house at 4 a.m., but again, I maintain that regardless of what was happening, he should still be here.
During an earlier press conference, Metro Police Chief Conti seemed quite annoyed. What, if anything, has he told you about how they're handling this case?
He did seem quite annoyed, and I think many of the requests and demands from neighbors have been reasonable. Part of his annoyance, as he shared, came from misinformation that was being spread and the threat of neighbors taking justice in their own hands. Coincidentally, that's exactly what people are concerned about in this case, that a neighbor took matters into their own hand, and now Karon Blake, 13-year-old in Ward 5, is now dead. What we are hearing from MPD is that they are still investigating in this case. They're pursuing a grand jury. They're working hand in hand with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they are cautioning neighbors from calling for more information for fear of jeopardizing this case. I, again, don't want to undermine the investigation by any means, but I think it's unreasonable to suggest that simply sharing someone's name, let alone apprehending them and having a proper investigation, would threaten this case. And so we are still putting pressure on MPD and the U.S. Attorney's Office to share more information. The family is calling on MPD and the U.S. Attorney's Office. And more importantly, community leaders from across our city are joining in the call. And so we are not going away. We will not allow Karon Blake's legacy or death to be in vain. And we're going to use this as a pulpit to make sure that this doesn't happen to another 13-year-old.
Mm-hmm. You hosted a community meeting recently, too, a few days ago, just so people could air their concerns and probably get some more information. How'd that go?
It was intense, and we had hundreds of individuals that came, a lot of pain, a lot of frustration. The purpose of that meeting was to hear from neighbors about what they're thinking, what they're seeing, but also to get answers to their questions from MPD. We were joined by the assistant chief for MPD, and neighbors were met with many talking points, frankly, and left with many questions unanswered. I appreciate MPD joining us, but there was a lot of pain and frustration in the room, which is to be expected. I appreciate my colleagues and community members from rallying and what we've committed to doing. And I am continuing to do is to get answers to those questions. And so the headline here is we're not letting up, and this is not going to be something that we sweep under the rug.
You requested body footage, police body cam footage from
Yes.
the local authorities. It seems that the body camera footage would have been taken, would have been collected, recorded after the event. What do you hope to learn from that camera footage? And have you received it yet?
That request was submitted last week. And the goal there was to get more information around the interaction between responding officers and the individual that took Karon Blake's life, to get more information about who this individual is. And that request was denied by Mayor Bowser. By statute, the chair of the council's Judiciary Committee has a requirement to see the video footage should it be requested. I am pleased that my colleague Brooke Pinto has requested that information. We are limited by law of talking about it, but what that does is ensure that there is a level of transparency that we haven't seen yet in this case, and that we're holding our partners at MPD accountable. Mm-hmm. What comes next is, again, that we're working with the family and advocating for the family to make sure that they are getting information and that justice can be served in this case. Mm-hmm.
There's been a number of shootings, not just we're just a few weeks into the new year, but coming out of 22, a number of shootings of young people in the district. Is there any connective tissue between that and things that are going on with the city council, or what are people saying? What are your colleagues saying in terms of where the causes of this rise in violence are and how it can be alleviated?
Yeah, there are three things I would say. I believe we all have a muscle memory around young Black boys being killed in our streets. And so when this incident immediately happened, what I heard from a lot of neighbors is, this reminds me of the killing of Trayvon Martin. And I think one of the reasons why MPD put out the information that they did was to tamp down concerns that there was a racial element, a white person shooting and killing a Black boy involved in this case. Two, we are very concerned at the council at the flow of guns in our city and at the rise in gun violence across the district. Just today, we voted to override the mayor's veto of a criminal code revision process that will update the district's criminal code for the first time in over 100 years. The simple answer here is that the district, not being a state, is at the mercy of our federal partners in helping us curtail the flow of guns across our borders from Maryland and Virginia and elsewhere. And we have to work alongside them. And the last thing I would just say is we are seeing too many of our young people brandishing guns, but also being the victim of gun violence in the city. And we have to get serious and rely on all of our partners. And that has to start with transparency, because we can only move at the speed of trust. And again, the reason why I'm calling on MPD and the U.S. Attorney's Office to share more information in this case is because I do think it sets a precedent for how we're going to govern ourselves in the future.
The shooter, still unidentified at the time of this post, has been placed on administrative leave from his job in D.C. government. Meanwhile, a decision from the grand jury on whether or not to charge that man is expected shortly. Well, that is it for this edition of Now. If you like what you see, tell a friend, will you? And like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and be back here, right here, next week for another edition of Now. Till then, take care. Peace.